All right, so today we're diving into the world of Liverpool gangs.
Yeah, should be interesting.
And get this, our main man is Darren Gee. Straight from the horse's mouth, you know. We've got this intense YouTube interview, no filter.
Oh, wow.
Listener, buckle up because G does not hold back.
I bet.
Now, just to be clear, right off the bat, we're not here to glamorize this life, you know.
Right.
What we are going to do is unpack Gee's perspective, how he sees loyalty, betrayal, the whole, psychology of that world.
Exactly. Try to make sense of it all.
And for our listeners who might not know, you want to give a little background on Darren Gee.
Yeah, so Darren Gee, he's the real deal. He was right there in the thick of it.
Yeah.
High-ranking member of Liverpool's gang scene.
Oh, okay.
So love him or hate him, we're getting this inside view from someone who was, deep in it.
No holding back.
No.
And he jumps right in. I mean, one of the first things he talks about is how different he is online versus face-to-face. Online, he admits it. He's all about confrontation.
Uh-huh.
But in person...
Different story.
Totally different, yeah.
Interesting.
He even tells this story about confronting this guy who was, trolling him online.
Oh, right.
And the guy just backs down immediately when they're face-to-face.
Wow. Really highlights the difference between online personas and, real-life interactions.
Yeah.
It's like a whole different ballgame.
What do you make of that? I mean, is it all just bravado?
It makes you wonder, right? I think a lot of it has to do with the online worlds,
Mm-hmm.
There's a layer of anonymity there. You can act tough, say things you might not say to someone's face.
Because there are no consequences.
Exactly, consequences, yeah.
And it's funny you say that because it goes right into this phrase that G repeats constantly.
Which one's that?
It's, if he knew who you was.
Yeah, right?
Over and over. It's like that anonymity is everything in that world, even more so online.
Anonymity is almost like a shield, especially in that world. It's all about reputation, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Maintaining this image of being, fearless.
You can't be afraid if you don't know who to be afraid of, right?
Exactly.
And it's interesting you say that because G even claims that Ian Farley, who, for the listener, he was a notorious Liverpool gangster, a big deal.
Yeah.
He claims that Farley wouldn't even confront him alone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he said Farley rolled up to his place with another guy packing.
No way.
To back him up, right?
Just to confront Darren Gee.
Yeah. If that's true, that's saying something.
It speaks volumes. I mean, it really shows you the power of reputation. Even the threat of violence can completely dictate how people behave.
Even among these guys who are supposed to be, the toughest of the tough.
It's like a house of cards, isn't it? You take away that reputation, that fear, and the whole thing could crumble. It's fascinating.
Let's talk about snitching for a second, because Gee's got this really interesting take on it.
Okay.
He actually says that it was the old school gangsters who brought in snitching, but as blackmail.
It's a different perspective for sure.
Yeah.
Just so our listeners clear, when he says old school, he's talking about a previous generation of gangsters.
Right. Different rules, different times. A lot of them were all about that no snitching code.
Yeah.
Exactly. But Gee's point is that somewhere along the line, that got twisted.
It's murky waters. Whether or not they actually started that whole snitching as blackmail thing, it's hard to say for sure. There's not really any evidence to prove it.
But it's interesting to think about, right? How the rules of the game have changed.
It is. It really is. And it makes you wonder, what are the motivations behind joining a gang in the first place?
Right.
What draws someone into that world?
Is it loyalty, money, power?
Or some, toxic mix of all of them?
Right. Because when V describes the real gangsters in Liverpool now, the guys at the top, it's not exactly a pretty picture. He's talking about, older guys battling addiction, pulling strings from the shadows. Not what you'd expect.
It's actually not that uncommon, though. It's a pattern you see a lot. Age and addiction kind of go hand in hand with these power shifts in that world.
So you're saying this is a trend. It's not just a Liverpool thing.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Happens everywhere. It's the nature of the beast, I guess. That life, it chews people up and spits them out.
Man. And here's where Gee gets really interesting, I think.
Yeah.
He says that real strength, true strength, it's not physical. It's mental.
Interesting.
He even brings up Tyson Fury, the boxer, right? World champion. But Fury's been open about his struggles with mental health.
Right.
Even with all that physical power, the pressure gets to him. It just shows you, right? You can be at the top of your game physically.
But if you're not right mentally,
yeah,
it all falls apart.
And that's what I find so fascinating about all this. It kind of flips the script on this whole tough guy image, doesn't it?
It does. It makes you wonder, if so many of these guys are fighting their own battles, up here, Tap's temple. What does that say about why they were drawn to this life in the first place?
It's like they're looking for something to make them feel powerful, you know? Maybe that's part of the allure.
It's a really fascinating thought, isn't it? Like,
Mm.
are these guys just inherently violent, power-hungry, or is it more complicated than that? Are they trying to fill some kind of void?
Right, like a need to belong or something, even if it's in a totally messed up way.
It's possible. And you know, what G is saying, it adds a whole other layer to it, you know? Like, maybe some of these guys are searching for something deeper, even if they go about it in destructive ways.
So it's not just about the violence or the money. It's about finding a place where you feel like you matter.
Yeah, exactly. It's a messed up way to find that, for sure. But it's a way, it's like that tough guy thing we were talking about. Maybe it's all just a front.
A way to protect themselves.
Yeah, exactly. If that's how they see the world, as this dangerous dog-eat-dog place, then that armor, that persona, it's survival.
And the pressure must be immense, right? To constantly have to keep up that facade.
Oh, absolutely. And we have to remember, this isn't theoretical for G, right? He's talking from experience. He's lived in that world. He knows those pressures firsthand.
And he's not sugarcoating it.
No, not at all. He's laying it all out there, the good, the bad, the ugly. The betrayals, the violence, the toll it takes on you.
It's a lot to process.
It really is. But that's what makes this whole deep dive so important, you know?
Yeah.
We're not condoning what these guys do, but we're also not here to judge them.
We're trying to understand.
Exactly. Trying to wrap our heads around what makes this world tick.
Right.
What makes someone go down that path? What do you think, listener?
What stands out to you?
And maybe, just maybe, if we can start to understand those complexities a little better, we can start to address the root causes. Look past the stereotypes.
See the human side of it.
Exactly. Because these are real people with real struggles, even if they've made some bad choices. And those struggles, those choices, they have consequences.
For everyone involved.
For sure. It ripples outwards. Families, communities, even future generations are impacted by this stuff. It's a sobering thought. It makes you question a lot of things, like how do we as a society address those systemic issues that lead to this kind of lifestyle? How do we offer support, opportunities for change?
Without, excusing the behavior.
Right. Holding people accountable while also recognizing that there's often more to the story than meets the eye. So much more.
And if we're talking about those deeper issues, if this life is as mentally and emotionally taxing as G makes it seem, what does that say about the guys at the top?
The ones calling the shots.
Yeah, the ones with all the power. What happens when they're the ones battling those internal struggles?
Oh, that's a great question. Because you got to imagine, if the leaders are operating from a place of instability, it's going to have a ripple effect.
A whole structure could crumble.
Exactly. And that's what's so important about all of this, understanding the psychology of this world, not just the actions. Because if we can understand the motivations, the vulnerabilities, those internal pressures, then maybe, just maybe, we can start to disrupt that cycle of violence. It all comes back to that.
We have to look beyond the stereotypes, beyond the headlines, and recognize the human element.
Couldn't agree more. It's like we always talk about gangs as if they're, like these big, scary machines.
Yeah, like they're all organized and everything.
Right. But what G reminds us is that it's not that simple.
It's still just people.
Exactly. People with their own reasons for being there, their own issues. And those issues, especially at the top, man, they could really mess things up.
Like a domino effect.
Exactly. So it's not enough to just focus on the crimes themselves. We got to look at the bigger picture.
The human side of it all.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so complicated.
So where do we even go from here?
It all comes down to understanding, doesn't it? Like, we can't just slap a label on it and call it a day. We have to be willing to ask those tough questions.
About why people get involved in the first place.
Exactly. About the choices they make, the pressures they face. It's not about excusing their behavior. It's about getting to the root of it.
So we can actually start to break the cycle.
Right, because at the end of the day, these are real lives we're talking about.
It's easy to forget that.
It is. But G's perspective, raw as it is, it reminds us of that.
That's for sure. Well, as always, this has been enlightening, to say the least.
It's been great diving into this with you.
Listeners, we always want to hear from you. What stuck with you from this deep dive? Did anything surprise you? Let us know. And until next time, stay curious.